With a home-heavy schedule for the Florida Panthers, it is important for them to gain confidence at home and to prove it to themselves and themselves only.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Thursday, February 8th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're to your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News, and you can follow me on X at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. So, Florida Panthers fans, it is a game day and a chance for the Florida Panthers to bounce back after stubbing their toe coming out of the All-Star break. And this is a very important conversation and that we are going to have today on the show as a part of bouncing back, but also the mindset for the Florida Panthers as they go into game 2 of this 3-game homestand. And want to introduce my guest on today's show. He is a guest that you guys have heard before, and he has a new podcast out. He is one of the 3 co-hosts of the Cats and Rats podcast, Kirby Lupal. Kirby, welcome back to the show, my friend, and Great to have you here.
Armando, thanks for always having me here. It's always a pleasure of mine. And I think the last time we connected here on Locked On was the California trip, kind of previewing the LA Kings game. So I look forward to kind of previewing this week ahead. Obviously, the Washington Capitals game that's next on our docket here. Very interesting February schedule where we start out with this home stretch, and then there's like a 3-game road stretch, and then at the end of the month there's a 3-game home stretch. I think Colorado is the only team outside of the Eastern Conference that the Panthers play in the month of February.
Yeah, and when it comes to this specific month of February, where most of the success for the Panthers has been on the road, but when you look at the month of February, 7 home games to 4 road games on the schedule, to be exact. Already off to not the best start when it comes to the schedule with the Panthers giving up the last 2 goals to the Philadelphia Flyers and not really getting anything 5-on-5. But I want to go mostly in a direction of something that you spoke about in your debut episode of the Cats and Rats podcast, about something that Paul Maurice said at the very beginning when he first got hired by the teams about needing to do the daily investments. And also that's something that he said it in a different way at the start of training camp, the need to reinvest into what has worked for the Panthers, obviously coming off the Stanley Cup final run that they have, but also in times like this, where at one point the Panthers had a losing streak at home, a 4-game losing streak too, where they got 2 points out of the 8 in there as well, and also how he's spoken about a few weeks ago, how a lot of these teams have what's called the emotional advantage. The Panthers are being the hunted. A lot of these teams that they have on the schedule are teams who are on the bubble of being in the playoffs. Pittsburgh is one. You have Washington 2 times this month, both at home, thankfully. Tampa Bay on the road coming up next Saturday. 2 teams fighting in position for the division, Colorado and Carolina. And then 2 teams playing for pride in Ottawa, Buffalo, and Montreal on the schedule as well. As far as maturity, as far as the group for the Panthers and what the coach is implementing as far as emotions and reinvestment, how are you seeing this as a time for the Panthers?
Yeah, I just think I was kind of thinking off the air how, we kind of prepare our content. You're always thinking of, okay, how am I previewing these games and things like that. Now, what I do on the Twitter X Spaces, and I've talked about this before, is like we're reacting to after these games. And I think there's a bit of an overreaction from the fan base from what I saw on the loss coming off the All-Star break, winning those games before the break. And you're kind of seeing this team in a little bit more of, they get on a little bit of a heater and then they'll take a couple steps back, but then they're able to refocus and recommit to the things that Paul Maurice talks about. And if you do go back and listen to the Paul Maurice quotes and things that he said last year, and that's what a good job of my co-host Nick Levine did. He dug into those Paul Maurice press conferences and things like that. And the fan base didn't want to hear it at the time last year. And I know we've talked about this here on your show before, but if you do go back and hear that versus in contrast of the things that I dug up on Bill Zito, I'm still kind of like, how did Bill Zito believe in that team without adding anything or selling off a guy like Ratko Gudas to add in some picks that, we need to stockpile what we have down there in Charlotte. But getting back to Paul Maurice, I think we're starting to see the direction of this team now. This is a team that does have to figure some things out on home ice, but when it comes to road ranks, I had a tweet out there where, they're top of the league when it comes to penalty kill on the road, but they're around like 27th or something like that on home ice. So I think good teams and elite teams figure things out on the road and can get their things in order at home. And again, some of those things could be skewed. I know that Minnesota Wild game, a lot of those power play goals there might have skewed those home road split numbers. But again, when it comes to Paul Maurice, I've always kind of believed in him and believed in the direction of that this team needed to make those changes and those different directions with going from a run and gun offensive team to now a lockdown team. I can't believe, Armando, how good our numbers are across the board defensively, metrics wise, just raw stats wise. And then later that we're going to get into Washington where, this is a team that is really struggling for identity, be it offense or defense. So again, I'm a Paul Maurice guy. I believe that he's able to kind of right the ship with this team now. He has the pieces and the systems in place that he wants. Now this team's going to have to add come to the deadline. We talk about that a lot on our post-game show. There's one or two pieces that we obviously need, and you've probably talked about that ad nauseum with your guests here on the Locked On Network. But again, I like the direction of this team, and I don't overreact to a loss here or there. This team kind of gets they kind of right the ship. And there's other teams around the league that lose to bad teams and lose to certain teams. And you got to give credit to the Flyers the other night. They're a team that's hung around that playoff spot, that playoff bubble all year. They're a young team, but they didn't look good in those first 20 minutes against the Panthers, but they kind of got it together in that last 40. And, the Panthers do have to bring out a better effort on home ice against Washington and Colorado here.
Yeah. And it's crazy when you think about losing to bad teams, and then you're even some of the contending teams, you look at their schedule and you see that they get swept by a certain opponent. For the example, you just listed one of the opponents that the Florida Panthers got swept by in the Minnesota Wild, one on opening night, and then recently giving up 5 on the power play. So, it's still, there's still that time to get it right at home, especially where you'll be playing most of the games coming down the stretch in the same time zone. The only one that will not be until to next month on March 12th against the Dallas Stars. So I think that's really important as far as, not tracking the mileage as far as travel. And like I said yesterday, the fact that morning skates are going to be at War Memorial now, I think it's definitely going to be an advantage for the Florida Panthers going forward as far as that. So it's a good time for a lot of mental recovery, not just physical recovery for the Panthers as far as that, and maybe that could result in some home wins. You have a thought?
And if you want to talk about Paul Maurice really quickly on the War Memorial Coliseum, he already wants the guys there to get ready for all kind of the ice surfaces there, the dual ice surfaces coming into the rink, preparation and stuff like that. So I like that, hearing that as a former coach myself and someone that's coached a long time, just getting these guys mentally prepared and different things like that. Those are the little things that matter and add up come playoff time.
Yeah, no doubt, for sure. So we'll definitely circle back at that when we get closer to the postseason, that's for sure. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2. We're going to discuss more about an ex-Panther who has put more of his mark in the South Florida community. And is there going to be an outdoor game coming to South Florida anytime soon? We're going to discuss that and more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. And we are driven by the search for better. When it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 300 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps find a quality candidate fast. Ditch the busy work and use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed just doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Leveraging over 144 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. So the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. And listeners to the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your job more visibility at Indeed.com/locked on. Go to Indeed.com/locked on right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/locked on. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Also, this episode is brought to you by Robinhood. Do you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRA and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC is a registered broker dealer. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now you can find it on Amazon Fire TV. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today channel now on Amazon Fire TV. Back on this Thursday, February 8th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Thursday. Here with special guest Kirby Lupul of the Cats and Rats podcast, part of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. And you know, I love it when great people are affiliated with another. The fact that you are affiliated with Alex Baumgartner, it's pretty great, Kirby. Not going to lie. The fact that you guys are affiliated with one another.
We weren't even talking off the air on this, but I was just thinking of Alex, and I might have a quote to share on our next segment here regarding that. So it's funny that you said that. We didn't even plan that.
Cool. So one thing before we go into this is the Panthers have unveiled jerseys for their Vamos Gatos night on Saturday against the Colorado Avalanche, which is such an incredible design. The Vamos Gatos Panther with the Cuban coffee on the side, a claw grabbing the state of Florida as well. Such a pretty cool design. If you guys have a chance to see it on their social media, go ahead and look for it there. Also, the Chicago Blackhawks have been given another outdoor game, and they will be hosting the Winter Classic at Wrigley Field against the St. Louis Blues. So, as far as an outdoor game for the Panthers, I say temper your expectations because the viewership has been down as far as these outdoor games, especially on the American TV side. So the NHL is trying to recover some dollars and view and eyeballs. So they want Connor Bedard on that stage for sure, which we can understand as well. But as far as another topic on the docket today, Anthony Duclair, the Duclair Foundation, has started breaking ground on a synthetic ice surface, in Lauderdale Lakes at Boyd H. Anderson High School. And also, Kirby, Anthony Duclair is hosting a youth hockey camp this week at the Ice Den in Coral Springs. And a lot of the money that the Florida Panthers donated to Anthony Duclair for his foundation has gone to the community programs and activations for the rinks. And also the NHLPA Goals and Dreams committed $50K as well. I want to get your thoughts on the new rink that the former Panther Anthony Duclair has broken ground on.
Yeah, just before we get into that, I wanted to add my point to the Vamos Gatos jerseys. I love the ones last year, the black, and just the design. I'm gonna have to go look at the orange design as closely as you did there. But yeah, I used to wear orange as a coach, so I'm all for that. Great jerseys, and looking forward to seeing all the merchandise out there too that the FLA team shop should probably put on Instagram and Twitter and things like that. But yeah, on the Anthony Duclair thing, let me just share that quote quickly here from Alex Baumgartner. This was from Duke. I didn't expect Billy, as in Bill Zito, our GM, to come by, so I definitely appreciate that. It speaks volumes to what type of a guy he is. They treated me like gold with my time here in Florida. So that was something that Alex published today on behalf of the Duclair quote on Bill Zito. So, and before I get into that, you get so many comments in your mentions. If I ever mention Anthony Duclair, if just the min counts do, they're like, bring Duke back and everything. And, you know, I understand the reasons that we did move on from him, and I thought that we would. But yeah, so many fans are in support of him, and you still see his imprint in the South Florida communities down there. And it's great. It's great to see. And yeah, this news kind of caught me by surprise, because I wasn't aware of or anything like that. And you'll have to tell me kind of about synthetic ice. I don't know if I've ever been on synthetic. I just know of a like natural up here in Canada. I even think there was a rink. I saw it, the closest I probably got was a rink in San Diego, and I never ended up skating on it, but it was an outdoor facility one. But yeah, it's just big for these players. And I talked about this on our debut episode of the Cats and Rats podcast. If you don't have figures like Bill Zito in charge and Vinny Viola at the top as owner, you're not going to get these former players like Anthony Duclair coming back to the team, and Gregory Campbell, and a guy like Roberto Luongo, who could get lured away to Vancouver or his hometown in Montreal, but where he calls his home away from home, and now his like natural home, really, in a sense, in South Florida. You're not going to get these players like Anthony Duclair coming back and investing money into the community and into the grassroots program. And I'm a grassroots coach, so that's huge for me to see, like, that there could be growth down in South Florida by these contributions from a former player in Anthony Duclair who still cares about the area at a very high level. And we're going to see where it goes with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just the alumni base that the Florida Panthers continue around here. I mean, Jova on the broadcast, Randy Moeller, even though it was towards the end of his career with when he joined the Florida Panthers as a free agent after their second year. And also Peter Worrell spoke about this too. And there's also another announcement on Peter Worrell today, as the War Memorial and Matthew Caldwell have announced new leadership group for the facility, and Peter Worrell is a part of that too. And also, I think it's great to have that partnership there, and keeping
started with the grassroots program coaching, right? And now it's like developing into more. It's manifesting into more now. So
yeah, so definitely something that is just, I mean, it goes back to also what Bill Zito had to say in his media availability when War Memorial opened. And this was actually a question that was emphasized after Alex Baumgartner asked the question about wanting to be Broward County's team and to put their presence in there. It was, and let's not forget, once again, this was all starting before President's Trophy, before Stanley Cup final run, and now it amplifies it. And seeing that they are family-based organization as far as how they treat players, and even attending this event, it wasn't only Bill Zito. It was Brett Peterson as well, who Brett Peterson's going to be the general manager of Team USA at the 2024 Worlds as well. So it's also even if Bill Zito is gone from now, it's still trying to make way for and being the example, trickling down to the rest of that front office.
Yeah, well said. And just, it all starts from the top down, and that's when we did the deep dive on our podcast, from, you know, ownership down to GM, down to coach, and you're starting to see that stability finally in all those phases. And it's just so refreshing to see, as people that might know of me or haven't heard this, but, you know, I'm an OG Panther fan, 30 years. So it's just great to finally see this stability within the organization. And then you start to see the fruits of that labor when it comes to community outreach and things like that. And I think this current iteration of this ownership and organization has always done those type of things with the grassroots programs in the communities and the hospitals, and getting the players a lot more involved than they probably were in the past. So they've done an excellent job of that. And I think they know how to do that because of their leadership background and experience. In the military and, stock market and different leadership roles and capacities that these men have had, and women as well that are on the, public relations front, on the social media front, in the front office. So again, I just think kudos across the board. And it doesn't really surprise me at this point when I do see these stories. Back in the day, it might have, but now it's kind of almost expected, which is good.
Yeah, and you yourself have seen through it all as far as the good and bad of once Wayne Huizenga sold the team, and then everything.
We have stories for hours on that on Spaces. We have stories for hours with fans coming in.
Definitely well documented there. That's for sure. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we are going to preview tonight's game between the Florida Panthers and the Washington Capitals. We are going to discuss this and more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. And you shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. Gametime is the fast and easiest way to buy tickets for all sports, music, and comedy events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and view from your seat, the best price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And you can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show your total upfront, so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out. Buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's a place to find last-minute tickets. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, hockey, concerts, theater, and more. With zone deals, you pick the section and Gametime picks the seats for big-time savings. And the Gametime guarantees you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Third and final segment here on this Thursday, February 8th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Thursday. So, Florida Panthers, they will be taking on the Washington Capitals tonight from Amerant Bank Arena. The second of 3 matchups, the first one of 2 on home ice for the Panthers. And last time the Panthers faced the Capitals, November 8th, nationally televised game here in the States on TNT. Anthony Mantha scores twice, one on a breakaway. Sam Reinhart won it 15 seconds into overtime. And a game where the Washington Capitals got off to a shot on goal advantage 10-3 before the Panthers tied it and really started turning the game around there. Got down 3-2 before Erod ties it, and then Sam Reinhart wins it in overtime as far as that. So a little bit has changed for the Washington Capitals since the last matchup. The scoring still not quite there. Ovechkin is finally in double digits as far as goals, unlike Alexander Ovechkin, but it's only gotten worse as far as it's already been a hard time getting him the puck. But now one of his best playmakers in Evgeny Kuznetsov is not with the team right now due to going into the players' assistance program. Kuznetsov has already had a hard time with the previous coaching regime in Peter Laviolette, and there was rumors about whether he was going to stay around and all. Nicholas Backstrom is on IR for the Capitals as well. So this is a really good get right game for the Panthers as far as what's available for the Capitals and what's not. I mean, it was well documented as far as last game. Sam Reinhart didn't get a shot on goal. Many missed shots as well. Barkov has been scoreless since as far as not getting goals since December 16th. As far as that, Nick Cousins 1 game back after the concussion for him. So this seems like a get right game for the Panthers, and it doesn't take away the need for top 9 help for the Panthers, which Anthony Mantha on the other side could be one that the Florida Panthers could be going after in the trade deadline. I know you had a thought on a Panther killer in the past, and Adam Henrique, and something that you had a report on. If you want to elaborate on that, but how are you seeing this matchup as far as the Panthers going into this one against Washington, an opportunity for a get right game?
Yeah, you again, we didn't talk about this off the air, but you stole another name out of my mouth, and Anthony Mantha. I think that could be a really good fit for the Panthers. We break down in our community what free agent targets are. I know he's got a big ticket, but I think it's only 1 year remaining on that. So Bill Zito able to move some money around. And again, there can be retention. There could be third teams in on deals now because we're getting away from the COVID freeze and we're getting to more of an era of where there is eventually going to be more cap money. Which should be a given next year and then moving forward. So again, and even if it's a rental as well, what is the price that Washington's asking for? But so many people come into our post game, Kirby, we need secondary scoring. We need top 9 wingers. And I think Anthony Mantha fits the bill. And I just want to add a little other side note on our last time that we played Washington. That was the Mike Riley game where he made a couple bad plays, the penalty, the bad pinch, and that was the end of Mike Riley there. So Mike Riley was someone that I was reported on last summer or even prior to that the Panthers had interest in him. I did get a report here that the Panthers are looking at, I know this is not Capitals related, but Adam Henrique of the Ducks, talking about foundations with Duclair. Adam Henrique does foundation work with our own defenseman, Brandon Monter. So there could be a little bit of a connection there. They've got to make the dollars work. It's same with Mantha, same with Henrique. If they want to bring in a target like that, they're going to have to make dollars in, dollars out. Makes sense. What is the asking price when it comes to a pick? There's players like Josh Mahura, Steven Lawrence, and then as well, Nick Cousins. I think the coaching staff and team believe in him for the playoffs, but where's the fit there long-term with a guy that's also coming to the end of his contract as well with Florida. So I think there's a movement to be made. And again, there's going to be injuries happening probably from now to the deadline. So you have to consider that when I think Zito this year will actually finally make a move, whether it's addition up front on the back end or even a depth piece as well. So maybe as much as I'll say 3 additions he might make. But on to the Washington front, this is a totally different Washington team that many of our fan base grew up knowing in the Alexander Ovechkin era. Bottom metrics when it comes to power play, shots on goal, goals for, and their defensive metrics are better than their offensive metrics, which is just crazy to think with the names that you mentioned, like Backstrom, Kuznetsov, Ovechkin. A lot of these guys not in the lineup. That Tom Wilson deal still is kind of weird to me, where they extend him for 8 years when he's in this group. And he's going to be extended into the next group, or there's going to be a buyout down the road there because he's not young, approaching that 30 age. So again, like this is a team that's now better defensively than offensively. But if you dig into their defensive numbers, which I kind of did tonight before coming on your show here, Armando, those numbers don't look good either. They're kind of mid across the board. So what is this team's kind of identity? And I looked into the goaltending numbers, and the goaltending numbers aren't there either. So again, a young coach in Spencer Carberry that's trying to implement things that he wants to do moving forward. Like you mentioned, it's a get right game. I think, this is the yesteryears of where the Panthers struggled against Washington, be it on home or away ice. I think they've had their number of recent memory here. Panthers, like you said, I didn't look into the numbers there, Armando, but the missed shots was a big story against Philadelphia. So let's see if they can kind of correct that 5-on-5 and power play and get some more of those shots towards the net and, get some tips and deflection goals, which I want to see, and get to those high danger areas and kind of capitalize on them. And I think this is a team that you can definitely, like you said, get right against, and then heading into that big game on Saturday against Colorado.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see what kind of tape Washington watch as far as Tuesday, as far as how they're going to defend the middle of the ice as well, because that's definitely something that was fairly well protected as well on the night for Tuesday, and especially with experiences like guys like John Carlson, who missed a lot of last season, and that's really what derailed the Capitals down the stretch last year and even some experience in a Joel Edmondson, who's made a Stanley Cup final with the Montreal Canadiens as well just a few years ago. So a little bit of a transition as far as the Ovechkin era, and even a promising player there in McMichael. I like his game. Did score a shorthanded goal the last time these two teams faced as well. So still in a little bit of a crossroads. Their goal differential, I believe, is -30, if I'm not mistaken. So definitely eye-opening as far as that as well. And also, if you want to trade for Anthony Mantha at a quarter of his salary, it'll be 1.425 million. Just to keep that in mind as far as what a trade for Anthony Mantha
Can
could
play
look
on both wings as well, I think. So
Yes.
kind of versatile. Those are the players that Bill Zito looks for. He looks for that center winger, but I think Mantha can play on both sides. So again, whatever they can make that work on the third line, I think Zito's got to look at all those options.
Yeah, and he loves his flexibility when it comes to that. I think you pointed out as far as the only two players who you don't see play center who can are Matthew Tkachuk and Ryan Lombard. Those are really the only two that you really don't see at the center position as well. But Kirby, this has been a great show. I want to thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Before I wrap up, I want to say that tomorrow morning, I'll be traveling down to War Memorial for morning skate and attending the next two Panther games. So if you happen to be in the building, holler at your boy, and maybe we could meet up to say hello for those listening. But also, Kirby, I want to give you an opportunity for a minute or two, to introduce your new podcast with the 5 Reasons Sports Network, Cats and Rats podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Armando. And you're going to ask me all this, so I'm grabbing out all the handles here because we're adding so many new things right now. So I apologize for that, looking at my phone here. But yeah, everyone can follow me as always on Twitter at KJ_loops. That's LUPS. That's where I do a lot of my work, be it post game, a lot of content in the mornings, a lot of things that we do community involvement. Right now, we've got a lot of our Cats and Rats community giving me trade targets. So like I mentioned and alluded to earlier, so we'll be really focusing on top 9 forwards and depth defensemen. So again, if you're not a Twitter X person, I really advise you to try to get an account, give it a try. You're going to get a lot of content there that you're not going to see over on the Instagram side and different things like that. And I'll mention our new Instagram handle, which is Cats_N, the letter N, Rats_podcast. So again, we're starting to get a following there just in a matter of about 48 hours. So I'm trying to produce some content there. I'm more of a Twitter guy than an Instagram guy, but I understand kind of building our base here. And I know off the air, Armando, we're going to talk about that a little bit as well. So and as well, our new network at 5 Reasons Sports, they're more Twitter driven, especially when it comes to their content, things like that. But you can also find them over on Instagram. And again, we're kind of been brought into their network to increase and beef up their Panthers coverage. Alex Baumgartner did a great job. He had a podcast there for a while, but he wants to focus on his writing, and so does the network. So what our job is coming in and having a weekly podcast, keep doing what we're doing on the post-game spaces, and kind of produce that audio multimedia platform engagement and content for everyone. And that's kind of where I'm at, up my alley. My original background is journalism, but I kind of went away from that into more broadcasting realm. So that's just up my alley, and it's a perfect partnership so far. And we're having a great time with 5 Reasons Sports Network. So make sure to lock in with them, and lots more good things to come, not only in season, but towards the playoffs. And then also in the off season, we're going to keep pumping out content as well.
Awesome. And even though I can't necessarily join you post game for spaces because we're both working at the same time, still great to still have you in between games as well.
We got to get you on in the summer and the trade deadline and the off hour stuff. Any breaking news? Hey, Zito, sign Reinhart, then we got to get you on for some of that.
Yep. That'll be the difference between the post game shows and the Twitter spaces for sure. And definitely will have to schedule a time to go on your spaces and be a featured speaker there, as I believe I have done maybe like 2 or 3 times before. So, but definitely got to get back on. Kirby, thank you so much as always. Always great to have you on, and I will see you next time, my friend.
Thank you, Armando.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone, and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Kirby Lupul, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.